I was changing a tire on a Mercedes when I found the briefcase that would expose how my stepfather stole $102 million from me. My name is Michael Carter, and at 37 years old, I made $14 an hour at a tire shop. The man who raised me since I was 8 had kicked me out at 19 with 5 words that still burn. "You're not blood, Michael." That Tuesday morning started like every other morning for the past 13 years. I woke up at 5:30 in my apartment above Mancini's Deli, where the smell of fresh bagels mixed with motor oil from my work clothes. I pulled on my blue uniform with Heartland Tire and Service stitched on the pocket. I grabbed my thermos of black coffee and drove my beat-up Honda Civic to work. 220,000 miles on that car, and it still ran because I knew how to take care of things. That is what you learn when you have nothing. You take care of what little you have got. The Mercedes pulled in, and I remember the exact moment because I was watching the clock thinking about how I would need to work another 3 hours just to afford a decent dinner that night. The car was pristine black, probably cost more than I had made in the last 5 years combined. The owner stepped out wearing a suit that looked like it was tailored by angels. Stephen Parker. He introduced himself, checking his phone every few seconds like the world might end if he missed an email. "Just need a tire rotation," he said, already backing away toward the coffee shop across the street. 30 minutes. 20, I told him. Because that is what I always said. Under promise, over deliver. That was my mother's advice back when she was alive. Back when I thought I had a future that involved more than rubber and steel. I should tell you about my mother, Laura Montgomery Hendricks. She was the sole heir to the Montgomery maritime fortune built by my great-grandfather, Eugene Montgomery, on the Great Lakes. When people heard the name Montgomery in Michigan, they thought of cargo ships and millions of dollars. My mother inherited everything when her father died. Her younger brother, my Uncle Danny, had been cut out of the will because he fell in love with the wrong gender, according to my grandfather. Danny moved to Spain in 1984 and never looked back. My real father died in a construction accident when I was 3. I barely remember him, just the smell of sawdust and a rough voice singing me to sleep. My mother married Richard Hendricks when I was 8. Richard was in commercial real estate, successful enough that people did not whisper gold digger at first. He had silver hair even then, a smile that could sell ice to Eskimos, and hands that never did honest work. The day they married, Richard put his hand on my shoulder in front of all the wedding guests. "I am going to take care of this boy like he is my own," he announced. Everyone applauded. My mother cried happy tears. I wanted to believe him so badly that my chest hurt, but behind closed doors, Richard showed his true face. "Your real father was a nobody kid," he would say when Mother was not around. "A construction worker who could not even stay alive long enough to raise you. I am doing you a favor by letting you use my last name at school." I never took his name. I stayed Michael Montgomery Carter, holding on to my mother's family name like a life raft. When I was 19, my mother got sick. Brain tumor aggressive and unforgiving. She went from hosting charity galas to unable to remember my name in 4 to 8 months. I dropped everything at Michigan State University to be with her. Richard barely visited the hospital. "I cannot stand seeing her like that," he said. But I would catch him on the phone with his lawyer asking about estate procedures. She died on a Thursday. The funeral was on Monday. The will reading was on Tuesday. I sat in that lawyer's office, Harold Garrison's office, wearing my only suit, while Richard wore something that cost more than a semester of college. Garrison read the will in a monotone voice. "I leave my entire estate to my beloved husband, Richard Hendricks, trusting he will make appropriate provisions for my son Michael's education." Richard did not even wait until we left the building. Right there in the parking lot, with people walking past, he turned to me and said those 5 words. "You are not blood, Michael." Then he continued, his voice calm, as if discussing weather. "Your mother is gone. The gravy train stops here. Pack your things and get out today." I stood there in that parking lot, 19 years old, suddenly understanding that everything my mother built, everything her father and grandfather built, was being stolen from me by a man who spent 11 years pretending to be my father. That was almost 20 years ago, nearly 2 decades of working jobs that broke my back and crushed my spirit. Nearly 2 decades of watching Richard live in luxury on my family's money while I counted pennies for ramen noodles. Almost 20 years passed until that Tuesday morning when Stephen Parker's Mercedes rolled into my service bay carrying a briefcase that would change everything. My life at Heartland Tire and Service was not what anyone dreams about, but it was honest work. The shop sat on East Fulton Street in Grand Rapids, squeezed between a payday loan place and a Chinese takeout that had been there since 1987. Every morning I arrived to find Darren Phillips already there, coffee brewing in the break room that barely fit 3 people. Darren was 54, built like a linebacker, gone soft with grease permanently embedded under his fingernails despite scrubbing them raw every night. "Michael, you are the only guy I trust with the foreign cars," Darren would say. And that was his version of a compliment. He had hired me 13 years ago when I showed up desperate, having just been fired from a warehouse for refusing to work off the clock. Darren asked me 3 questions. Can you work Saturdays? Do you steal? Can you actually fix things or just talk about it? When I answered yes, no, and yes, he hired me on the spot. The pay was $14 an hour, barely enough to cover my rent for the apartment above Mancini's Deli. 600 square feet of water-stained ceiling and pipes that clanged like ghost chains at night. The window faced a brick wall and the refrigerator hummed louder than a freight train, but it was mine. Nobody could kick me out as long as I made rent. I need to tell you what life was like before everything went wrong back when my mother Laura was alive and Richard Hendricks still pretended to care about me. We lived in the Montgomery family estate in Eastbrook, a mansion with 18 rooms and gardens that required 4 full-time groundskeepers. The house had been in our family since 1925 when my great-grandfather Eugene Montgomery decided his shipping fortune needed a monument. My mother was beautiful in that old money way where confidence mattered more than makeup. She served on 6 charity boards, spoke fluent French, and could make anyone feel like the most important person in the room. She met Richard at a fundraiser for the Grand Rapids Art Museum. He was bidding on a painting, throwing around numbers that made other bidders step back. Mother outbid him at the last second, then offered to let him buy her dinner as a consolation. They married 8 months later. Michael needs a father figure, she told her friends, and maybe she even believed it. Richard certainly played the part well at first. He showed up to my Little League games, taught me to tie a Windsor knot, even helped with my math homework, but there were signs I was too young to understand. He would introduce me as Laura's son, never my stepson. He would count the silver after my friends came over. He would make jokes about my real father that were not quite jokes. Your dad worked construction, he would say at dinner parties. Probably never read a book without pictures. Good thing you got your mother's brains right, Michael. My mother would tighten her lips, but never confronted him publicly. Private arguments leaked through the walls at night. He is just a boy, Richard. He is my son. His response was always the same. I am providing for him, am I not? The best schools, the best opportunities. What more do you want? My Uncle Danny visited exactly once after Mother remarried. Daniel Montgomery was her younger brother, an art dealer who had fled to Spain after their father discovered he was gay. The disinheritance was swift and brutal. Danny showed up for my 13th birthday bringing a first-edition Mark Twain and stories about Mother's childhood that made her laugh until she cried. Richard hated him instantly. That lifestyle, he muttered after Danny left. No wonder your grandfather cut him off. Mother's face went cold. That is my brother Richard, my only family besides Michael. Richard never mentioned Danny again, but he also made sure Danny knew he was not welcome. The birthday card still came from Spain, but the visit stopped. When Mother got sick, everything accelerated. The tumor was the size of a golf ball, pressing on parts of her brain that controlled memory and speech. One day she was reviewing foundation grants. The next, she could not remember the word for coffee. Richard hired nurses the best money could buy, but he was always somewhere else. Business trips multiplied. Evening meetings became essential. I remember her last coherent day. She grabbed my hand with surprising strength and said, "Michael, promise me you will be okay. Promise me you will finish school. I have made sure you are taken care of." I promised, not knowing that Richard had already been working with lawyers to ensure I would get nothing. After she died and Richard threw me out, I spent the first night in my Honda Civic parked behind a Walmart trying to understand how life could change so completely in one day. Almost 20 years later, I was still trying to understand it, still waking up angry, still falling asleep to the sound of Richard's voice. "You are not blood, Michael." My mother's illness started with headaches she dismissed as stress. By the time she admitted something was wrong, the tumor had already stolen pieces of her mind. I was 19, halfway through my sophomore year at Michigan State University, studying business administration, because she had always said, "Michael, someone needs to understand how to manage the Montgomery legacy properly." The diagnosis came in September, glioblastoma grade 4. The oncologist, Dr. Morales, tried to soften it with medical terms, but I had already Googled enough to know what it meant. 4 to 8 months if we were lucky. Mother sat there in her Chanel suit taking notes like she was planning a charity event instead of her own death. "We will need to accelerate some things," she said calmly. But her hand shook when she reached for her water. I moved back home immediately. Richard complained about the disruption. "The semester is already paid for Michael. This is wasteful." Mother was dying and he was worried about tuition money. That should have been my first real warning, but I was too focused on her to see the vulture circling. The descent was brutal. October, she forgot my middle name. November, she called me by my dead father's name. December, she did not know me at all. Richard hired nurses, Polish women who spoke in whispers and smelled like antiseptic soap. He stayed away, claiming important deals needed closing. "Someone has to keep the money flowing," he would say, as if the Montgomery fortune needed his help. She died February 10th, 2007 at 3:00 in the morning. I was holding her hand. Richard was in Chicago, or so he claimed. The funeral was massive. Hundreds of Grand Rapids elite pretending they had been close to her. Richard played the grieving widower, perfectly accepting condolences with just the right amount of stoic suffering. Then came the will reading. Harold Garrison's law office smelled like old leather and disappointment. Richard brought his own lawyer, which should have been my second warning. Garrison read the will dated December 2006, 1 month before Mother died, when she could not remember her own name. "I, Laura Montgomery Hendricks, being of sound mind and body, leave my entire estate to my beloved husband Richard Hendricks, trusting he will make appropriate provisions for my son Michael's education." Sound mind. She had been calling the nurses by her dead mother's name that entire month, but the signature was there, shaky but legally binding. Richard's lawyer smiled like a shark who had just spotted blood. In the parking lot, Richard dropped all pretense. "You are not blood, Michael. Your mother is gone. The gravy train stops here. Take your clothes and get out." He handed me an envelope with $600 cash. "That is more than you deserve, but I do not want you claiming I left you with nothing." I tried fighting it. I spent the $600 on a consultation with a lawyer who told me the truth. "Without proof of mental incompetence or fraud, you have no case. The will is legal." I am sorry, son. The next 18 years blurred together like a watercolor painting left in the rain. First I tried finishing college, working 3 jobs to pay for 1 class at a time, lasted 6 months before exhaustion won. Then came the restaurant years, washing dishes, bussing tables, eventually working as a line cook until I burned my hand so badly I could not hold a spatula for 3 months. Warehouses came next. Amazon, FedEx, any place that needed bodies to throw boxes. My back started giving out at 35. By 40, I was swallowing ibuprofen like candy just to make it through a shift. That was 13 years ago when Darren found me at an unemployment office, both of us waiting to file paperwork. "You know cars?" he asked. "I know enough," I answered. He hired me because he needed someone desperate enough to work for $14 an hour, but smart enough to handle German engineering. Meanwhile, Richard lived like royalty on my mother's money. He sold the Montgomery estate to tech money from California. $34 million that should have been mine. The buyer tore down the gardens my great-grandmother had designed, put in a meditation pavilion and a CrossFit gym. Richard invested the millions, bought commercial properties, remarried twice to women half his age who pretended not to notice his cruelty. His biological daughter, Olivia Hendricks, born from his first marriage, became his princess. She got the life that should have been mine. Private schools, a Yale business degree, a boutique in the Old Town district that lost money every month but gave her something to do. She would bring her Bentley to our shop for tire rotations, never recognizing me talking on her phone about vacation homes and charity galas while I serviced the car my mother's money had bought. Every night for almost 20 years, I fell asleep replaying that moment in the parking lot. "You are not blood." The words had carved themselves into my brain like a mantra of loss. I lived my entire adult life in Richard's shadow, a ghost of the person I should have been, until that Tuesday when Stephen Parker's Mercedes rolled in, carrying the evidence that would burn Richard's stolen kingdom to the ground. Stephen Parker's Mercedes sat in my service bay like any other luxury car I had worked on over the years. He had rushed off to the coffee shop across the street, checking his phone and mumbling about conference calls. I popped the hood first, checking fluids out of habit, then moved to the trunk for the spare tire inspection that came standard with our rotation service. The briefcase was Italian leather, sitting beside the spare tire compartment like it owned the space. As I reached for the tire pressure gauge, my elbow knocked it over. Papers spilled out across the trunk's carpet, and that was when my world tilted. The top sheet, printed on expensive letterhead, had words that stopped my heart. Estate fraud investigation. Montgomery case, 2007. My hands started shaking. Montgomery was my mother's maiden name. The year 2007 was when she died, when everything was stolen from me. I looked across the street through the shop's window. Parker was still in line at the coffee shop, trapped behind a woman ordering what seemed like coffee for an entire office. I picked up the papers, trying to stack them back properly, but my eyes caught more words. Forgery analysis. Laura Montgomery. Hendricks fraudulent will. Documentation. My chest felt like someone had parked a truck on it. I spread the papers out my greasy fingers, leaving smudges I would later worry about, but could not care about in that moment. The letterhead read, Porter Lewis and Associates, Forensic Accounting and Financial Investigation. Clipped to a folder was a photograph of my mother's signature, blown up and annotated with arrows and notes. Clear evidence of tracing one annotation read, Pressure points inconsistent with natural writing flow, said another. There were bank statements I remembered, charity donations my mother had made, each with her genuine signature. Then came the will's signature, shaky and wrong, dated from when she could barely hold a spoon, let alone a pen. Side by side, the difference was obvious even to my untrained eye. A sticky note in what must have been Parker's handwriting was stuck to another page. Meeting with FBI Financial Crimes. Thursday, 2 p.m. Richard Hendricks indictment likely. My stepfather's name in connection with FBI and indictment made me dizzy. I gripped the edge of the trunk to steady myself. Deeper in the briefcase was a typed statement signed and notarized. The name at the bottom stopped me cold. Daniel Montgomery. My Uncle Danny, who I had not heard from in decades. His statement was dated 6 months ago. My sister Laura visited me in Spain in May 2006, already experiencing symptoms of her illness. She brought legal documents for my review, including a will dated April 2006. She was completely lucid during this visit. The will explicitly stated that her son Michael Montgomery Carter would inherit the entire Montgomery estate upon reaching age 21, with Richard Hendricks serving as executor only until that time. She told me I need someone to know the truth in case Richard tries something. She knew him better than I realized. My phone was in my pocket, an ancient Android that barely held a charge. I started taking pictures, not caring about angles or lighting, just documenting everything. 60 photos in total bank records, showing Richard moving money the day after Mother's funeral. A forger's confession. Some guy named Kevin Lowell, who had kept records of every job, including creating a fake will for Richard Hendricks. There was an email chain between Danny and Elaine Porter herself, the founding partner of the investigation firm. "We have been searching for Michael for 3 years," one email read. Richard Hendricks claimed he left the state, possibly died. "We need Michael's testimony to complete the federal case." Looking across the street, I saw Parker finally getting his coffee. My hands moved fast, putting everything back exactly as I had found it, using my shirt to wipe away the fingerprint smudges. By the time he walked back, I was rotating his last tire, looking like just another mechanic doing just another job. "All set?" he asked, still distracted by his phone. "Yes, sir. You are good to go. That will be $59.99. He paid with $120, told me to keep the change, and drove away without ever knowing he had just delivered my salvation. I waited until his Mercedes disappeared into traffic, then walked to Darren's office. "I need to make a call," I said. "Personal emergency." Darren looked at my face and nodded. "Take all the time you need. I found Porter Lewis and Associates online using the shop's ancient computer." My fingers trembled as I dialed. The receptionist's voice was professional, almost bored, until I said my name. "Michael Carter. Michael Montgomery Carter. Please hold." "Mr. Carter, please do not hang up." 30 seconds later, a woman's voice came on, urgent and warm. "Mr. Carter, this is Elaine Porter. We have been looking for you for 3 years. Your uncle hired us to investigate your mother's estate. Can you come to our office immediately? We have evidence that is going to change everything, but we need you." The law offices of Porter Lewis and Associates occupied the top floor of a building I had driven past 1,000 times, but never imagined entering. Elaine Porter met me in the lobby herself, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and eyes that had seen enough fraud to recognize truth when it walked through her door. "Mr. Carter, your uncle has been trying to find you for years," she said, leading me to a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Grand Rapids. He never believed the will was legitimate. On the conference room's big screen, my Uncle Danny appeared via video call from Barcelona. His hair was white now, but his eyes were the same warm brown as my mother's. "Michael, my God, look at you. You look just like her." "You know that?" The story came out in pieces, each more shocking than the last. Danny had hired the firm in 2023 after Kevin Lowell, a professional forger, was arrested for creating fake documents in a federal case. The FBI raided Lowell's storage unit and found what he called his insurance policy. Detailed records of every forgery he had ever created, including one for Richard Hendricks in December 2006. Lowell was paranoid, Elaine explained, sliding a photocopy across the table. He kept notes on everything. Look at this entry. December 12, 2006. Richard Hendricks, $60,000 cash. Forged will for Laura Montgomery Hendricks. Subject dying of brain cancer. Original will leaves everything to son. Hendricks wants it all. Easy trace job from sample signatures. Hendricks says she cannot write anymore. No one will question it. My hands clenched into fists. Richard had paid $60,000 of my mother's money to steal the rest of it. Danny leaned forward on the screen. Michael, your mother came to see me in Spain 7 months before she died. She was starting to have symptoms but was completely lucid. She showed me her real will. You were to inherit everything when you turned 21. The Montgomery Maritime fortune, the estate, all of it. Richard was to receive $6,000 a month for life enough to live comfortably, but not enough for the luxury he craved. Elaine pulled out more documents. We have the original will. Your mother filed a copy with a law firm in Barcelona, probably because she did not trust anyone in Grand Rapids. She knew Richard was capable of something like this. The FBI had been building their case for 6 months. Wire fraud, mail fraud estate, fraud conspiracy. With Lowell's confession and the evidence Danny had provided, they had enough for federal charges. They had been waiting to find me. The final piece. We need you to testify, Elaine said, about the day Richard kicked you out. About your mother's mental state in her final months, about everything. 3 days later, I sat in a federal courthouse conference room giving a deposition that lasted 7 hours. I told them about the parking lot, the $600, the words that had haunted me for almost 20 years. The FBI agent taking notes stopped writing when I described my mother calling nurses by dead relatives' names while supposedly signing away $102 million. The arrest happened on a Tuesday exactly 4 weeks after I had found the briefcase. I watched from across the street as FBI agents walked into Richard's country club during his weekly golf game. He came out in handcuffs, his polo shirt untucked, his silver hair mussed for the first time I had ever seen. That was when he saw me. His face went from confused to furious to frightened in the span of 3 seconds. You! He shouted, struggling against the agents. You did this, you ungrateful little nobody. I walked closer, staying just outside the crime scene tape. No, Richard. You did this to yourself the day you decided I was not blood. It turns out blood meant everything, just not the way you thought. Olivia arrived as they were putting Richard in the FBI vehicle, her Bentley screeching to a stop. She ran toward her father, then turned on me when the agents would not let her near him. You destroyed my father. He raised you. He gave you everything. He gave me nothing, I said quietly. He stole everything and gave me $600 and a lifetime of wondering why I was not enough. Your father is going to federal prison because he is a thief and a forger. The money you have been living on, that Bentley you are driving, that boutique that loses money every month, all of it was stolen from me and my dead mother. The trial was swift. Lowell's lawyers tried to argue that he was lying for a plea deal, but the evidence was overwhelming. The forged will, the bank records, Danny's testimony, my testimony, and finally a recording Lowell had made of Richard explaining exactly what he wanted forged. Paranoid Lowell had recorded his clients without their knowledge, another piece of his insurance policy. The verdict came on a Thursday. Guilty on all charges. 15 years federal prison. No possibility of parole for 10. The judge ordered restitution of $102 million plus interest and penalties. Total, $132 million. The federal marshal seized Richard's assets within days of his conviction, the mansion in Northwood Hills, the investment accounts, the commercial properties he had bought with my mother's money, everything liquidated to pay the restitution. Olivia tried to claim her boutique was separate, bought with gifts from her father, but gifts purchased with stolen money are not really gifts at all. She lost everything except what she had earned from her own job, which was not much considering the boutique had never turned a profit. My first call after the verdict was to Darren at the tire shop. I will not leave you hanging, I told him. I will work 2 more weeks, help you find someone good to replace me. Darren laughed. The first time I had heard him really laugh in 13 years. Michael, you do not owe anybody anything. You just got handed more money than God. Go live your life. You gave me a job when nobody else would, I said. 2 weeks, Darren. That is what decent people do. Uncle Danny flew in from Spain for the asset transfer. first time I had seen him in person since I was 13. He looked older but happy, wearing a linen suit that probably cost more than I had made in a month. We met at what used to be Richard's mansion, now legally mine again. "Your mother loved you more than life itself," he said, standing in the foyer where I had last seen her alive. "She would be so proud that you survived all this that you never became bitter enough to stop being good." The money came in waves. First the liquid assets, then the property sales. Finally, the investment accounts Richard had hidden offshore. $132 million. I stared at the bank statement for an hour, trying to understand how those numbers belonged to me. But money could not buy back nearly 20 years. It could not give me the college graduation my mother would have cried at, or the wedding she would have danced at, or the grandchildren she would have spoiled. It could not erase the nights I had slept in my car or the days I had chosen between gas and food. What it could do was prevent others from suffering the same fate. I established the Laura Montgomery Hendricks Foundation with an initial endowment of $35 million. Full college scholarships for foster kids and stepchildren who had been rejected by their families. The first recipient was Jordan Blake, 19, kicked out by his stepmother 3 days after his father's funeral. It sounded familiar. I bought back the Montgomery estate from the tech couple who destroyed the gardens. They made a 40% profit in just 3 years. But I did not care. I restored everything. My great-grandmother's rose garden, my mother's fountain, even the treehouse where I had hidden when Richard's words got too sharp. The meditation pavilion became a greenhouse. The CrossFit gym became my mother's library again. I moved her grave from the public cemetery to the family plot on the estate grounds, where she should have been all along. Standing at her new headstone, I spoke to her for the first time in years. "Mom, he was wrong. Blood is not what makes family. You were my blood, but more than that, you were my heart. Your love got me through nearly 20 years of hell. Every time I wanted to give up, I remembered you telling me I was destined for something special. It turns out you were right. It just took a little longer than we planned. I kept one promise to Darren. I bought the tire shop not as an investment, but to keep it running exactly as it was. Darren became the manager with a salary that finally matched his worth. Every employee got a raise to $28 an hour plus benefits. The guys thought I was crazy, but crazy with $100 million is just called eccentric. Stephen Parker brought his Mercedes in for service 6 months later. He recognized me from the news coverage and nearly dropped his coffee. "You are that inheritance guy, the one who exposed the whole forgery thing." "I am just Michael," I said. "And you, Mr. Parker, forgot something in your trunk that changed my life." "What did I forget?" he asked, genuinely puzzled. "To lock it." We both laughed him nervously, me with the first real joy I had felt in decades. As he drove away, my phone buzzed with a text from Uncle Danny in Spain. A photo of a guest room with an ocean view. "Your room is ready whenever you want to visit. Family is forever my nephew." I smiled, looking at the photo of my mother I had hung on the shop wall, the one thing I had saved through all those dark years. Under it, I had installed a plaque. Laura Montgomery Hendricks, 1965-2077. A mother's love never dies. Richard was wrong about blood. Family is not about DNA or legal documents. It is about who shows up, who stays, who loves you when there is nothing to gain. My mother was my blood, but she was also my heart, my strength, my reason for surviving. And in the end, her love proved more powerful than all of Richard's greed. If you found this story meaningful, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear that justice sometimes comes, even if it takes years. Comment below if you have ever had someone tell you that you were not enough, that you were not family, that you did not belong. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances and finding their way home. Thank you for listening to my story.